Hello and welcome. My name is Susan and I draw and share my progress here with you every day. Today, while I work on this portrait, I want to share 4 things I wish someone had told me earlier when I was learning to draw faces. So I drew portraits for years before they started to actually look like the person I was drawing until I actually feel I did something. I mean, the proportions weren't usually the problem, the features weren't usually the problem either. The problem, as far as I could tell, was something just a little bit more nuanced. I had to really sit down and evaluate my process to identify what made things better versus worse. So what I came to understand slowly was that I was paying attention to the wrong things, or paying attention to the right things in the wrong order, if that makes sense. So drawing well isn't only about what you do, it's about what you do first and what you save for last and what you decide is worth committing to versus what you let stay loose, especially when it comes to my daily 20-minute routine videos. So the 4 things that I wanted to share today are really about that, where to put your attention and when you're practicing to draw better. None of these are rules, they are choices, and I learned each one of them the slow way. So even if one of them saves you, a year of figuring out on your own, this video will have done its job. So the first thing and the most important, in my opinion, is to always use a reference. If you're not at a level where you can draw the human face accurately from your head, and let's face it, unless you're exceptionally trained, which most of us are not, just always use a reference. I held on to the opposite belief for a long time because there's an idea floating around that real artists draw from imagination, or a good artist will draw from imagination. So that needing a photo is a sign that you haven't really earned it yet, that you should be working towards a future where you don't need any reference at all. I believed that and I felt guilty every time I pulled up a photo to draw from. So that's just not true. Even if you are the best artist out there and you draw beautifully from imagination, many of them, in fact, I would say a majority of them, will draw from references as well. And even if they don't do it now, they used to do it. They practice with references because that's how their imagination got accurate. Imagination is built out of remembering from observation. It's through years of practice. That observation requires a reference. So when you're drawing a face from your head and before you put in years of practice, you can't really draw a face accurately. You are drawing your idea of a face, the symbol of a face, and the result, almost without exception, will be inaccurate. The eyes will be too big or sit too high, the mouth will be too small, the skull underneath will look wrong, even if you can't really say what exactly is wrong with it. This isn't a matter of style or talent. It's a matter of having or not having the visual information you need to make the drawing accurate. So use a reference. Use it for as long as you need to. There's no shame in it. And the work you make with it will always be more honest than the work you made without it. So the second thing is about how you start a drawing once you have your reference in front of you. Lines are obviously essential to sketching. Sketching is, in a real sense, searching with lines. You're putting marks down, looking and adjusting. So I'm not going to tell you to stop using lines because that's not realistic and it's not how drawing works. What I am going to tell you is that the order matters. When I started out, I would jump straight into outlining features. I draw the eye, then the nose and the mouth, and try to make each one of them as accurate as I could using lines. Now, the problem with that approach is that you're committing to the placement of small things before you've worked out the placement of big things. So even if your eye is beautifully drawn on its own, it might be sitting in the wrong place on a head that hasn't really been built yet. So what works better for me is to spend the first few minutes of a portrait searching for the big shapes, not detailed lines. Light, loose, exploratory marks. That mass of a head, the lines of the jaw, the boundary between the lit side of the face and the shadow side, the shape of the hair as a whole, not strand by strand. These marks are still lines, but they're structural, not descriptive. They're saying the head is roughly this size and this angle, not the eyebrow arches like this. Once these big shapes feel right, the detailed line work has somewhere to land. The eye goes in correctly because you've already decided where the eye socket sits. The mouth lines up because the jaw is already there. You spend less time correcting and more time refining. So lines definitely important, but you have to give structure a place to live on first. So think in terms of shapes. Think in terms of large shapes before smaller shapes, and then fill in the lines afterwards would be the second thing. Now, the third thing is about colors. Okay, if you notice my drawings, almost always I don't pick a ton of colors. When most of us are adding color to portraits, we kind of treat each part of the face as its own thing. Like skin gets a skin color, hair gets a hair color, lips get a lip color. Each region is shaded with versions of its own assigned color. Now the result for that, even when it's technically correct, can feel disconnected, like a paint by numbers where each section is doing its own job and none of them are talking to each other. A good portrait drawing doesn't have to work that way. The skin has cool greens in the shadow side, warm pinks where the blood is close to the surface, ochre near the temple, almost lavender in the under eye. But a ton of these colors don't even matter when you limit your color palette to its most minimalistic and simplistic form, which I argue is much better for beginners who are practicing how to draw. So a lot of times I like to focus on the hue and not the color itself. You have to treat the whole portrait holistically as just a varying degree of darkness, right? So pick a limited color palette and choose how you can layer these colors together to form that warm versus cool, and focus on hues instead of specific colors that make sense in the realm of what you think a face should look like. So if you have been hesitant to commit to a smaller palette, try this. Just pick 1 or 2 colors you actually have and squeeze a whole drawing out of them. You'll learn more about hues in a week of doing this than in months of reaching for a new color every time you hit a new region of the face. So simple is key. Vary the hue, not the color, is my third advice. So the fourth thing is about contrast, and specifically about when to commit to your darkest darks. A lot of beginner portraits, including all of mine for a long time, have kind of like a foggy or a muddy quality. The values sit in a quite narrow middle range, nothing very light, nothing very dark. Everything kind of is just okay in that mid-range. So the drawing reads as flat, even when the proportions and features are correct. The fix for that is to make sure you have a true darkest shade somewhere in the work. The pupil, the deepest part of the nostril, the shadowed lines where the upper lip meets the lower lip, whatever the darkest dark of your reference is, your drawing should match it. But here's the part where I had to learn slowly. Don't put it down early. Save it for the end. When you're early in the drawing, you're still figuring out what that portrait is. The proportions are still shifting and you're still refining and adjusting where the true shadow should really be. The shadow shapes are still being placed, right? It's somewhere loosely. So if you commit to your strongest, most saturated darks too soon, you're locking in a high stakes mark before you've earned the right to really know if that's correct or not. Because once it's done, especially with ink or marker, you can't really take it back, or it's a lot more difficult to take it back and adjust that. So the darkest darks are accents. They're the marks that pull the whole face into focus. You want to place them when you have the most information, the most detailed information. So when the rest of the drawing is settled in, you can clearly see where the accent will do the most work. The pupil isn't just a dot in the middle of an iris, it's the mark that gives the eye its life. And you only know exactly where to put it once everything around it is in place. So work through your midtones first. Build a structure in those middle values where you have room to adjust. Then, near the end, Find your one or two truest darks and place them with confidence. That last commitment is what takes the drawing from foggy to alive. So those are the 4 suggestions. Use reference always. Find the big shapes before you commit to detailed lines. Vary the hues inside a small palette instead of reaching for more colors. And save your darkest darks for the end. What ties these things together for me is the idea that drawing accurately isn't really a talent thing. It's about paying attention to the right things at the right time. What you anchor on before you start and what you build first. What you commit to and what you save for last. I'd love to hear in the comments which of these resonates with you or which one you would push back on. I'll see you in the next one. Happy drawing!